Da 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 da. What's my good chair? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. Today, it has been this way all week. I don't know. I have my own fiscal year. Our yearly calendar has its fiscal year in January. But I feel in this moment change like it is just bashing me up against the wall every single day this week. And I think that maybe I get one great big insight, a huge understanding that sometimes they knock me to the floor, but it happens at the same time every year. Just when I think I've got things, that things are going to start settling down and I'm going to be able to take a little bit of a break and relax, and I'm going to feel better, and the people in my life are going to feel better, and the people who are supposed to be in my life will be in my life, and the people who are supposed to be out of my life will be out of my life. And that's not exactly how it works, to tell you the truth. Hello, Tammy. Right? This is my perspective, my truth, my understanding, because I've grown up in dynamic families. When we talk about personalities, when we talk about disorders, I have seen and experienced it all. And that's the truth. And I don't know why it's not as clear for other people as it is for me, because I suspect, I believe it is in my perspective that these different personalities are surrounding us at any given time. I might even go as far as all of the time, because a lot of these relationships are very dynamic. And especially when I've got this idea that our evolution is tied up in it, it's in the mixture and the synthesis of all these dynamic personalities, cultures, religions, right? That we are being molded into something different. And that something different is going to be different for every single one of us. That's true. It's like, it just came into my head. I don't know how this is relatable, but I had this image of when you do a grafting on an apple tree, and you take a little piece of an orange tree and you slice a little piece off the apple tree. You graft them together and you wrap them with, I don't know, painter's tape, scotch tape, duct tape, right? That you actually are combining two different fruit trees and you're creating one fruit trees. Now, the apple tree may exist outside of that tree. The orange tree will exist outside of that orange tree, but the orange apple tree has now been created into one tree. It's kind of how I'm thinking of this, you know, how we are becoming very, very dynamic in our thinking, in our understanding, in being able to feel for ourselves, right? To make decisions for ourselves, to finally, as women, have a voice, have a say, have a vote, have a role in leadership, right? And the men to be openly accepted in their feminine qualities along with their masculine qualities, that we're getting to this state where we're getting a little bit better about talking about those emotions, those confusions that we have in our system. And we've got to expect, if we're going through that, if we're amalgamating, if we are assimilating, we know that that isn't always a comfortable and sometimes not successful kind of idea, right? What just came to my mind again is the Indigenous here in Canada when we put them in the Catholic schools and we took away their mother tongues, that we took away their cultures and we put them in pants and suits and pretty dresses and took their beads and their regalia away from them, right? That didn't work out too well, did it? And it's not to say that it's not going to work, because I believe, in my perspective, that this is exactly what's supposed to be happening, is us amalgamating and assimilating and being grafted to each other. But it's in that mixture of, again, what comes to my mind, oil and water. It doesn't mix well, does it? You know, but you can mix some oils with different fluids. It's just about experience. I'm thinking coconut oil is sometimes quite able to be um, mixed with other soluble fluids or solids, right? And but it's going to take time. It's going to take time. And in taking time, we always, as humans, want things yesterday, don't we? We want everything. Just like I said, I woke up to some of these ideas and whew, okay, let's relax. Bingo, my card is full. Give me my diploma, my trophy, my bouquet of flowers, and a vacation, because I feel I need a vacation. And yet, right, to get smacked with other realizations that make it a realization and understanding that we're not even close to being done. And in fact, are we not even close to being done? We are just stepping into it. It's a new beginning. I really feel, that this world is changing in a way that we're not even going to recognize it. We're not even going to recognize ourselves, right? The good, the bad, the ugly. And when I say adapt and conquer, ride the waves, that's exactly what we're going to have to find that we have to do. And I find that I am doing. I had a beautiful day today. I had some chores. I went for a lovely walk to get to my destination. And when I left my appointment, I decided to go for a walk in an area, because I was in the neighborhood, but an area I absolutely love and don't get to visit. I guess I could visit it more if I wanted to. It's not so far away. But unless I'm walking by it, it doesn't even cross my mind. And today I was walking by it and I decided to go for a walk. And oh my goodness, it was absolutely just spectacular, just what I needed. And I found another pair of my sandals. I was in the bathroom and I looked across to my shoe shelf and I saw my favorite walking sandals sitting there. But I've been wearing my Keens so far all summer, my Keen sandals. I totally forgot that I had these Swedish pair of sandals that are made of like they're like Jerusalem made sandals with the strappings. But at the same time, they have a Swedish feature which is cork, which is so comfortable on the feet. And today I decided to wear them. By the time I got home, my feet were starting to ache a little bit. I might have even given myself a bit of a blister, but I walked a lot today. Like I walked a lot today, and I took my time and I was immersing myself in that experience. And then I came home, had some breakfast, lunch, and dinner all at the same time. I was hungry. And then delve into some perspectives. And I'm listening to a little bit of Carl Jung talk about narcissism. And narcissism has been a very big, intensive subject when it comes to what I'm absorbing, right? And again, I have to pay a little bit of respect in that because, we talked a little bit about yesterday about how everybody makes the narcissist the bad guy. And yeah, you don't want to put yourself in a difficult situation where you're going to be pounded down when you're used to having a say, when you're used to being your own boss and living your own life, and then all of a sudden you are under the thumb of somebody else. And I know that for a fact because that's what happened to my sister. you know she married, we'll call him, very headstrong, very domineering, very, right. He had a life that created him the way that he was, but in doing that, it was a bad mix for my sister, who was very headstrong herself, who was very set in her mindset, who wanted to have control, who actually needed that control in her life. And she was the matriarch in our family, and she thrived in that. That was everything to her, right? And she was the second oldest child, and normally that position usually goes to the oldest child. But I was having so much fun. My life, right? I was irresponsible. I was living my life the same way that my father lived his life, living it from day to day, creating the best life for myself as I possibly could. That did not entail taking care of all the needs of my family, dictating everybody's direction, overseeing everybody's responsibilities. Oh, just even thinking about it gives me a headache. I can barely even take care of my own needs. And in my sister being the matriarch, I have to take responsibility, right? In my own choices, that I allowed my sister to oversee my needs, oversee my life. She made good decisions. My sister made good decisions. And when I messed up, she cleaned up that mess, right? She directed me in what to do, or she would just wipe it clean herself. And that's the truth. And I have to take responsibility for that contribution. But we talked a little bit about it last week too, about how when those lifelines get dangled down to us and we're in such desperate situation that we will grab at anything not to go under. Lots of times in the idea of narcissism, that is specifically set in place that way because that makes the person who is the narcissist to feel like they're the savior, the lifesaver, the good one, right? The overseer that they got. And because they need that control, because that control comes specifically from abandonment issues, right? that it works very well for them. So it's kind of like a contract, right? I do for you, you do for me, right? You do as I say, you let me tell you what to do. Everything's good. You get yourself in trouble, I'll take care of that, right? And and if you don't do what I say, all hell to pay. So when I say that in my own experience in my life, I have had relationships with different personalities. I come from a very, very dynamic family, right? I don't know how it got set up that way. It was run in archetypes, but those archetypes were chosen by my parents and not the be all to end all. Who I'm saying is God or whoever or whatever is in charge. They're the ones that dictate, are supposed to dictate the roles that we play. But in this case, in my family chose, right? My mother had already messed up with me. I was the first child. I'm suspecting, I can't say for sure, that she had postpartum depression and she really, really messed up as a mother to me. And I rejected her very, very early in my life. And in that rejection, because she had those narcissistic tendencies, borderline tendencies, right? I'm going to say a little bit of sadistic tendencies too, right? That we were butting heads. So that first child role wasn't coming to me anyway. It wasn't coming to me anyway. They had decided. I'm assuming my mother never made decisions without my dad knowing exactly what was going on. That they decided they were going to switch roles. That my sister was supposed to be the empathic, the sensitive one. She was naturally, that was her nature because she was second child. By the time my mother had the second child, she was doing a little bit better. She kind of had the hang of it. She didn't mess up so bad, right? And I was technically supposed to be firstborn, take control, which I didn't want to do. I was perfectly happy to hand those reins over to my sister, but I think that role was supposed to be mine. But in that training, in that programming, they decided to switch those two roles. And my mother made my sister her second in command. We'll call it that. They have other names for that, like flying monkeys and I second gnats and right, golden child. They have other names for that. But my sister was also my father's daughter, and she was very sensitive herself, right? And, she grew up in having that need to control things when I don't think it was really her nature because, life crashed for her pretty hard. And I think, she's been getting an opportunity right now. I think this is what's going on with the whole world is, right? We're all having our little collapses everywhere because these lessons are coming across my path for a reason. And I believe that reason is because we're trying to overcome this problem of narcissism and control. It is right. It's going to make it a lot easier in this transition that we have to assimilate and amalgamate and this synthesis and these combining of different dynamics that if we could just take care of some of these really crucial personalities, that if we can help them through that process, that it would be an easier job to do, right? You got to make a mess to clean a mess. And I think there are collapses going on everywhere. And once that collapse is collapsed, like it's on the ground, it can't get anything worse. There's no more, like you can't handle even one more thing, then that's the moment of the softness coming in and the resurrection, right? I don't mean to, right? The connotations in that, but it's kind of, right? That we're getting a new beginning, but it's going to be in our choices whether or not to move in that direction or to hold on to dear life, to those lifelines that are hanging from the ceiling, right? To those pitchforks that, right? And those crowns that we dictated to ourselves that, right? I got those lessons too, right? Because I think naturally I have those aspects of myself, but because I allow those things to collapse and I delved in and did the work, I understood where I got things wrong and where I need to soften in my life. That's the failures, recognizing our failures. And in recognizing our failures, we eventually learn how to get things right, and grateful to have that all done in this one life, that moving forward in that next adventure, right? Not in this life, but there's going to be another adventure. Cindy's not going to be in it, but all that work that we put into it is going to be there. And it will be much easier, much better. And I think for all of us. And so, we have to understand that it's got to be a slow process, because collapses are not fun. They're extremely sad to be a spectator to, because it's a very isolated, personal thing that you go through. But when it's within your own vicinity, you have to be able to be witness to that. And, you have to make your own moves. And, right, I do the very best that I can to smooth out the rough edges. That's the job, right? Of the empath, right? That's the job of the caregiver, the highly sensitive, the codependent, to make life easier for other people. And I would like to make that process bearable at the very least, to help keep that optimism there in the people that I care about, right? Right or wrong, right? Everybody gets that chance to make choices to do better by themselves. And sometimes it just takes time. Sometimes it takes a community. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a battering, and you got to accept that too. And it's not about self sacrifice, right? You don't sacrifice what you've done good for yourself in order for somebody else to climb on your shoulders and stomp on your head and throw themselves over the bucket, right? It's not self sacrifice. But at the same time, right? Family is family, right? And it might not be a true family in the respect of how people think about it, right? Whether it's uh, not by blood, or whether there are serious differences, whether there are, right? Whether naturally they just really don't like you. But in that bloodline, and because I believe a big part of what's going on is in our evolution, right? That I think it's a gift. I think it's kind of like somebody bestowing a wand on somebody's head and saying, maybe you get to move forward. If you can come out of this, if you can do a little bit better, if you can make right your wrongs, if you can learn how to say sorry, and if you can learn that you need to be able to say sorry too, right? Not just expect it from others, but you have to be able to do it for others too. And to be a good steward in some aspect of your life. Show that you want to stick around. I had this conversation with my sister last week, right? That just want to show that you really want to be here. And that means caring for your neighbor, caring for your friends, caring for your family, caring for those communities that you have connections with. And even if you don't understand why those connections are there, those connections are there and you have to accept that. And so it's in wanting to do better by them too, but also understanding everybody's got free choice, right? I can't be the the worker bee in that, and nobody can be that worker bee for me. I have to do that on my own, right? Nobody I know wants to delve into Carl Jung. This stuff, I'm telling you, it is heavy, right? And I bet you a lot of people would not find it interesting. They wouldn't even be able to make it through a couple of sentences without switching the channel to Survivor, right? And that's the truth, but each one of us has different capacities in the talents that we have, the emotional stamina in the moment, the humor, the understanding, right? That it takes all kinds to make the world. It really does take all kinds to make the world. And we are getting more dynamic and more dynamic all the time, right? And we have to appreciate that. And we have to appreciate that sometimes you got to make a mess to clean a mess, right? Right? Otherwise, we just jump in and we use our own human brains to make decisions and dictate to people and rule over others and keep people at the level bottom ground when really they're supposed to be up there curing cancer, saving the world, right? Finding solutions for tsunamis and earthquakes and volcanoes, being able to read the weather, right? Travel space. There's so many problems out in the world, but you can't just load that in one person's lap and make them the responsibility for everything, right? And this is sometimes the problem of the narcissist because they need to have their fingers in everything, right? Not necessarily doing all the grunt work themselves, but be able to designate to everybody because they recognize strengths and weaknesses, right? Not just in others, but they see it in themselves too, right? And that's the truth, and that's the saddest part of it because they're all acting tough. I got this, I'm good, and they refuse to show that sadness, that need to be needed, right? That fragility in a moment that is super scary or super difficult, and and other people see that and it's uncomfortable, and when what happens when things are uncomfortable, we don't want to be around it, do we? And so it just makes a desperate situation even more desperate because people find themselves alone in these fragile moments in their life. I don't know where that conversation, it just kind of spewed out the moment. I'm just going to blame Carl Jung for doing that because that was the content that I was in on, and he said something kind of stirred me up a little bit, and I was just like, it's not that narcissists aren't a problem. We wouldn't be talking about them so much if they weren't a problem. But other personalities have problems too. And you just can't, and we just can't, and I just can't have that blame game, right? And just put it in one person's lap because they are a natural a hole, right? That's the truth. Okay, let me come in and catch some of these comments here. Hello, Tammy. Um, I believe I believe, like too, Sydney, in many ways and areas, I feel that we are at some new beginnings and new dawns in our life and around us and in the world. Some things are unknown to. So many things are unknown, right? They're not meant to be known because we're not ready to know it, are we? Right? Things are only revealed in little breadcrumbs and serendipities, and because we're all individuals with different perspectives, different cultures, different religions, different familial, right, issues, that we can't all get on the same page, and we don't really want to get on the same page, right? We want to be a diverse village, but we need to be able to get to the point where we're not wanting to take the heads off of all the other villagers, right? Or crown ourselves king of the village, right? That my dad ran the house on majority rule. I believe in majority rule only because the minority will hold majority accountable. So I believe in majority rules. And, you know, I don't know if it worked in my family because my dad was always the deciding vote, unless he knew that my vote wasn't going to count. Yeah, right? Sometimes he'd give somebody the honor of being the last vote, even though things were already swinging the way he wanted them to swing. He was a pretty smart guy. I bet you every majority rule that ran in our household, right? The outcome was already dictated before the vote was even put in. But that was his prerogative. That was his house. That was his kingdom. That was his castle. If that's how he wanted to play that game, that's how he played that game. No, I'm not going to say no worse for wear, but it did make us all feel that we had a say in things, even if we didn't. I always felt like I had a say when it came to majority rule because, for most part, in that household, I didn't have any say at all. I was riding the waves. I was adapting and conquering. I was, what do they call it? Fawning over anybody that had an attitude because I was so non confrontational, right? That my hypervigilance just kept everything in check all the time when it came to my own safety. And, we need to be able to grow up in families where we don't have to feel that way, right? That we could just live in situations where we can feel like we're valued, that we have something to contribute, but to be able to grow naturally in that ourselves without begging for the vote, right? Not not realizing that we have free speech, that we can contribute or not, right? And to be able to enhance our own gifts, strengths, right? Where we're naturally inclined. But because somebody is worried that you're just going to become a super smarty pants in something, that they just bombard you in a way where you just end up not having any confidence that you could even achieve what you would really love to achieve, right? And if that was the case, I would have been an anthropologist or an archaeologist, right? But I just didn't believe that I had it in me, right? So it became an interest for me and not a career for me. And so I'd like to see us all start moving into a world where we can actually find what of our strengths, what we contribute to that village in being able to be a community where we all get along and support each other, right? But there's still a blacksmith, a baker, a candlestick maker, right? Hello, Eugene. Okay, let me come back in here, back up a little bit. Um, Collapses are sad and can be hard, unreal, and painful, and fall apart. I've seen some collapses around me, and I experienced some in my life, but that's my surviving mode kicks in, and I overcome. And I would have to say also, Tammy, that sometimes do you think that you initiated that collapse in somebody? I believed that for quite a while, um, because you know things were not going well with my sister or in my sister's household, and my whole family, all my sisters and their husbands and their kids, they just didn't even want to be in that house anymore. It was so bad. I was the last person to leave, and when I left, everything kind of fell apart, right? And I really felt like, what happened with my sister was my fault, but that wasn't the case, right? I understand that now because if I had stayed, I would have kept her company in that misery and she would never have been able to escape. And she probably would not have been here right now. So I believe in a way that me leaving also, I was the last one to jump ship, but I jumped ship. I admit that I jumped ship and I left her alone in that to sink or swim because it was just taking me down in the moment. And that was the beginning of it, and she just been knocking those difficulties in her life like right out of the ballpark, like adapting and conquering and riding the waves and getting close to being on top of things again. But that's the problem, that a collapse is all about understanding that you don't have any control, that it's there to make you soften up and recognize where you got things wrong and have that fresh start, to recognize it's a fresh opportunity, right? And every time you go for that control, you're getting another lesson in, right? Fragility. And it is, yeah, it's difficult to be around. I've done the very best that I can in that because I understand what it is. But I don't like to see people I care about take hits like that. But even for myself, a lot of the tribulations that I went through in the past 10 years have been those kind of lessons to bring me down to the ground so that I could recognize and resolve in myself that I don't have all the answers, right? And that's something we all have to understand, that none of us have all the answers. And we can't pretend that we do. Because when we do that and we hold on to that control, eventually we'll find ourselves alone, right? And people who thrive in control, right, live in narcissism. Abandonment is the worst thing ever. That's usually what initiates a collapse, is when somebody finds that they're all by themselves in the moment. And that's the truth. Yeah. We're just gonna attribute that one to Carl Jung stirring something up in me. But this is how the lessons come to me too, when I go for walks or I'm piddling around the house on my own or I'm just sitting here in the chair thinking about something and then it just like a breeze coming across my mind. And I'm going, oh my goodness. And then I write it down, right? Then I write it down. What did I write here? Narcissist's greatest fear is abandonment. And that's truth. But there was something else that I wrote down about narcissism, right? Because in that training of the roles that we're divvying out, those archetypes that we've decided each one of the kids are going to live by, right? I got to understand myself that I'm only worth what I can produce. But in the same token, that's the way somebody who has control issues and narcissism, that's how they feel. That's how they feel too. And both of us are just overstepping each other, overstepping ourselves to accommodate our needs while at the same time overseeing other people's needs because we've kind of been like that apple tree, orange tree with the grafting, right? That we are kind of amalgamated and assimilated at synthesis. And it's not an apple tree and an orange tree, it is uh, apple orange tree. I know I was trying to find a word to combine apple and orange together to make one name for a tree. I'm sure there's right, but they do that all the time with trees and grafting them. There are lots of things out there that aren't like what they used to be. You know, Strawberries used to be this teeny weeny weeny, right? And mankind turn them this big, red, and juicy and delicious, right? But they used to be like this big. You wouldn't even be able to see them in the fields, right? And mankind turned them into something amazing. You used to not even be able to eat a banana because the inside of the banana, the veins in the banana were seeds, and it was a bitter, dry fruit. And mankind made it into something absolutely delicious. Now, those are only two examples, but there are lots of things that we have changed, right? Like corn and cob, you can get them in absolutely every single color now, right? But we did that, and that was grafting and right, amalgamating, assimilating, that synthesis and combining, right, more than one to make one. And I think that's what's going on with this world. Like, people downplay humans, right? But the thing is, I wouldn't want to come back as an octopus, right? Or a whale or an elephant. I'm trying to think of all the smart mammals or the closest primate, right? Which is the chimpanzees. The chip? No, it's the what's the monkey with the red bum? That's the one that's the smartest of them all. That would be the next stage in our evolution, right? No, right? We work too hard to get to where we're at right now. I say let's just carry on. We just gotta better learn to get along with each other, right? Get along with ourselves. Yeah. But yeah, I could appreciate Tammy that you've seen also uh, these collapses. I think they're just right collapse somebody's life and they get to the very bottom and things start settling down. And I believe that's a fresh start. Like, God is saying, okay, you've seen the worst of the worst, right? You have paid that karma. You understand how somebody else feels in those shoes because it's now happening in your own very life, right? Things are going to get better now if you choose for it to get better, right? If you go back to the old ways, right? It's kind of that idea. More, please, right? Okay. Hello, Eugene. And I always tell myself that I will never give up and not give up. It kind of makes me think like a boxer, a collapse. But you get up, stand up, and you keep fighting on in a good way. And that's the truth. That is right. That is the what is that saying? The strongest of the fittest, survival of the fittest. That's what it is the one that never gives up, that fights for the very last breath, that adapts and conquers, finds a way, rides the way, right? Rides the waves, whistle while you work, right? Sings in the rain, dances in the rain, right? And that is survival. That's movement forward 100%. Okay. Okay, you guys. Orangutans. Thank you. Thank you, Tammy. I'm gonna have to start calling you Andrew. You got those answers too for me all the time. Actually, Andrew emailed me the recipe for his Irish bread. He had a recipe, and I'm going to try and cut back on the bread again. And we're going to see if it's going to make some improvements in my life. I gave up bread for years. I don't know why I went back on the bread, but I did. But I think what I'll do is I will just incorporate nice breads, right? Sprout breads. I like sprout breads, breads that are made with very moisture sprouts and stuff. They make really good breads with those. I like really seedy bread, like the rye breads and stuff with lots of seeds and stuff. I'll eat those too. I just discovered ciabatta bread, and I really love that ciabatta bread. I think I'm pronouncing it properly. I might not be, but but not to get back in that process. I need to get off the processed food, right? I eat like a poor person, unfortunately, and the poor person eats processed food, and it's not good for you. It causes so many problems, and I think in some ways it's just the way that the rich people are trying to get rid of the poor people, right? By giving those offerings that looks in the way of volume rather than quality, right? Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I always look for the bigger things and not so much. Oh, a little chocolate bar with real dark chocolate, or do you want a great big dollar store chocolate bar that isn't really good quality, might not even be chocolate, but it's big, so that's the one I'll have, and it's just made of chemicals, right? And it's not good for you in any way. So yeah, I've got to learn to just be a little bit better, and just look at the quality of my meals. Even somebody who is low income can find and be creative in bringing good nutrition into their lives, right? That you can eat lots of eggs. Eggs are not expensive, and then you can eliminate the margarines, which are processed, right? And people look at the price of margarine, and you look at a price of a pound of butter, they're almost the same price. And then introduce, right, more fruits and vegetables into my life, right? I'm not a big seafood person, but I can get down English fish and chips. I can get down, jumbo shrimp, right? So I can be creative in how I get good, healthy proteins into me. I'm already pretty good with my vitamins, but I did find out a little conversation with my doctor yesterday that I am iron deficient. So she's sending me in for more tests, but it's all tied into that gastric bypass that I had in the 80s. And I totally forgot how important iron was. It came across my path, and I was really good with my iron for a very long time. But I came across something that said, that adults don't need iron. And it didn't even click in my head that I was taking the iron because of my gastric bypass. That's why I had to take the extra iron. And I kind of made myself a little bit depleted in my iron. So now I've got to take iron pills for a little while. Yeah, see what that does for me. But I just another in my mistake, because that was a serious mistake, because I haven't been taking my iron pills for, it's got to be 2 or 3 years now, right? That I haven't done any courses in iron at all. So that's on me. But it's in our failures that we get a little bit better, right? That I won't make these kind of mistakes moving forward. Or maybe I will, but I made some good decisions, right? I got myself a family doctor who sent me for blood tests and saw that I needed some iron. So she's written me a prescription. I'll get my iron pills tomorrow, and I'll do a course of iron pills and see if we can get things back to normal, because we need the iron, right? Especially after we're like post-menopause and stuff. It's very important that we get enough iron, right? These are things that I could have Googled, and right, and we make mistakes, right? And I think I'm right on top when it comes to vitamins and minerals. I think right, that little bit of narcissistic, controlling, I know it all kind of attitude, right? That's naturally in me. That right, that I didn't even think of it, and that's a boo boo on my part, right? A big boo boo, right? It could be a big boo boo, right? Because it makes it so that your vital organs don't get enough oxygen. Okay, you guys. Is it Friday? No, it's only Thursday. I will be back tomorrow. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk about something else. What we talk about, I have no idea. I never have any idea. But I come in, I take in the lesson for myself, the conversation for myself. I always get something out of it, right? And then the next day it'll just be something else, right? I appreciate your company, you guys. Thank you so much. Okay, you guys, here's the word: truth. Oh my goodness, here we are. Truth. We all fail in ourselves and in others. The truth is in the intent. Oh, you guys, that is such a good one. I right, I have to say that for myself, right? That is a good one, because especially when you're highly sensitive, like, we have to feel every situation, every experience, every conversation we have, because we do mess up. We mess up with ourselves and we mess up with others, but we have to feel the intent in that before we crawl down somebody's throat, before we fire them, right? Before we boot them in the butt, before we say, see you on the beach, never want to see you again, right? People hurt each other, right? We hurt each other all the time, right? And we feel bad for it. And sometimes we feel bad because we should feel bad, because there is fault sometimes in what we do that hurt other people, but sometimes, right, we hurt people and it's not our intent to do it. But once it's done, it's done. And then those lessons that we're supposed to learn about being able to say, I'm sorry, right? To say it'll never happen again. What can I do to make it up to you? How can I prove to you that I'm serious, that this won't happen again, right? And, we shouldn't have to go through that trouble because not a lot of people are able to say, I'm sorry. They're not able to say, yeah, it was my fault or, oh, that was mean, right? But us as the receiver of whatever unkindness or mistake came our way by somebody else's doing, that we should be able to feel somebody out. And if we know them good enough, right? If they mean enough to us, that we should be able to feel out their intent. The truth is, we fail in ourselves and in others. The truth is in the intent. That's a good one. I like that one. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you guys for coming in.